On this video, I'm going to give you my full review on this EVO Manufacturing 3.5-inch suspension kit. Now, in the last video, I showed you how to install this kit and why we went with this particular one under this 24 Wrangler Rubicon 392. On this video, I'm actually going to take it on the trail, get some on-road miles on it, so I can give you my full opinion on what I really like about it and how it really changes the Jeep over stock. Now, a few quick details on the kit. This is a Stage 4 EVO Manufacturing suspension. This is their Overland series, and what that means is that it's got the geometry correction brackets and it's got all new control arms front and rear. For tires, it has a 38 by 1350 R17 Nitto Trail Grappler, and the wheel is a 17 by 9 KMC tank beadlock that has 4.4 inches of back spacing. So let's talk about on-road driving, because there are some significant differences between stock and this suspension setup. Now, I want to go over a couple things because I think it's important to make note of. I had the opportunity to drive this Jeep with 38's in the factory suspension, and I'm really glad that I did that because it gave me the ability to, once I installed the lift, to see immediately what the differences are between this factory suspension or the factory suspension versus this EVO lift. And what I will tell you is, from the factory, the 392 has a very stiff front and soft rear. That's my interpretation of it. Ride quality is very subjective, but that's how I feel that suspension feels and performs. These are kind of on-road commentary. So that's my take on that. How does this compare? Well, I feel like if we're going to talk about a scale of soft to hard, I'm going to say what EVO has basically done is made the front medium and the rear medium. So now the Jeep feels a lot more balanced. It doesn't feel stiff in the front, it doesn't feel soft in the rear, it just kind of feels in that neutral zone. Is it stiffer than the factory in the rear? Yes, you have a higher spring rate. So does that mean it rides stiff? No, it just rides like, honestly, I think a proper lifted Jeep should. What do I mean by that? Well, it doesn't feel like you're riding like an old bucking bull down the road. It's not pushing you all over the place. It doesn't feel like, oh man, the suspension is so soft that it's now, made this Jeep undrivable. And it's also not so stiff that you took an SUV and turned it into a one-ton truck. So very, very nice balance between the two. I like the spring rate. The shock valving is more noticeable off-road, and I'll dive into that later. On-road, it feels perfectly compliant. Your suspension's not really moving that much on road, at least not here in eastern North Carolina. Our roads aren't that bad. In terms of handling on the interstate, you can drive this thing easily one hand down the road. There's not a lot of obnoxiousness to that. It doesn't feel like it's pulling or wandering anywhere. I'm a little bit over 6.2 degrees, I think is what my caster numbers are, and that makes it drive really nice. The tires are great. Trail Grapplers, as aggressive as they look, they don't make a lot of road noise. On-road PSI is 30 PSI, and I think that works really well. It has a nice flat pattern on it, doesn't steer weird. Fuel economy is laughable to talk about with the 392, and I think we're right at like 12 miles per gallon. That's not hand calculated, that's what the readout is saying. So now, I want to dive into off-roading, but there are a few notes that I want to make before we get too far down the line that definitely make a difference in terms of how this vehicle drives and rides. And one of those big factors is air pressure. Now, I am a big advocate of airing down off-road like everybody else is, and having a beadlock, you can go to those single digits, which if you're doing low-speed rock crawling where the tire really needs to conform to the terrain and you want the Jeep to ride better, is absolutely recommended. That being said, my experience with the 392 and how heavy the front end is and how hard it is to steer with the front locker engaged, I don't go single digits in the front. I'm typically around 13 PSI, sometimes 14 PSI, depending on the terrain with the 392 platform. And I know that seems really high to some people, but the reality is, without having hydraulic assist, this thing is very difficult to steer off-road with the tires aired 10, 8 PSI. That's my experience. So yes, trading off a little bit performance of the tire, not really ride quality difference, but more of a tire performance. And keeping this thing at around that 13-14 psi range though is going to allow it, when the front end is locked up, you can steer a lot easier, so you have to worry about getting that overheating steering warning, which definitely can happen, and it makes it much more easy to navigate the trail when you want to put your tire up on an obstacle and you're not just sitting there fighting the steering where it won't let you do that. So that's the trail pressure for most of the footage that you'll see. Out back, you can go lower, which this Jeep is usually 11-10 psi in the rear. I could go even lower, but realistically, it depends on what type of trail you're on, how fast you want to go. If you're someone like me that likes to drive kind of fast in between the obstacles, you're better off keeping it at that 11-12 psi range because you don't have to worry so much about making a mistake and hitting a rock or anything like that too fast and actually damaging the wheel. Now, how does it drive? Well, first let's talk about low speed off-road, because I think that's where most people are going to spend their time, especially my dad. This is his Jeep. That's going to be low speed trail riding where he's enjoying the scenery just like in being out on the trail. How does it feel? Do you get a lot of head toss? Does it feel like it's valved? And my opinion is this. I feel like at those low speeds where you're just slowly cruising down the trail and crawling over mild obstacles, it does really well. There's not a lot of head toss. It actually feels like it's got a really good balance of compression and rebound valving. I never felt like the Jeep wanted to unload or do anything really surprising. And I want to break off the low speed and the high speed a little bit, because if you are the type of person that wants to go a bit faster off-road and dial it back on-road, I would recommend getting the King 2.5s with the adjuster. That's going to allow you to turn up that compression, so when you go faster off-road, you can control those big hits a little bit better. My opinion is you can still drive fast with the suspension. I never felt like I was needing more travel in the rear. Up front is where I would hit bump stop a little bit faster, and I know a few people have commented on the bump stops up front, and I want to talk about that because it's a really good topic. With this 38, it's big, it's got a big offset, so I will say I flexed this thing plenty of times, checked clearance, I'm not rubbing anywhere. So this lift height not only looks really balanced for this 38, but with this bump stop amount in this configuration, it's not rubbing. Zero issues with it rubbing up front. If I remove that bump stop spacer to get myself a little bit more up travel, you can go a little bit faster, it's going to rub. Now I also want to talk about the control arms, the drop brackets, and the joints, because that was something I talked a bit about when I installed the suspension kit, and it's, to me, still a really big seller of this kit. So these control arms are not only stronger in stock, but they come with Johnny joints, and those Johnny joints really allow the suspension to move very freely. That's a big deal because that really translates to a smoother ride in cab. Now I did hit the control arms a couple times on this, no issues other than they have a few marks. I will say I did hit the control arms steering with these 38s a few times. I did see some rub marks, so I don't think that I would go any higher numerical backspacing with this kit if you are considering it, because you probably will rub that control arm even a bit more. I do also want to mention rubbing in the rear. It is really tight in the back. I mean, you can't put a piece of paper in between the tire and the inner fender, and it did look like it touched a couple times at the forward half of the front fender, but I don't again consider that rubbing. Not something that I feel like needs to be modified or anything like that. It's just super tight, but overall this setup I would definitely recommend. I think it works very well tire and wheel package wise, and lift height, bump stop height, all that seems to be perfectly fine with 38 and 3.5 inches. The only other thing that I think is worth noting that I know that was a question in the comments is about the front drive shaft. I've had a few people reach out and say, hey, like, isn't that gonna like mess up when you go off-road? Doesn't it seem like it's at an extreme angle? Because this Jeep still has that factory front drive shaft, and so far, so good. No issues, no torn boots. I know that the stock drive shaft is not as strong as an aftermarket drive shaft. The advantage and the only reason that it's staying in here for now is because You can have this 6.2 degrees of caster, positive caster. Jeep drives great, and there's no front driveline vibration. If you've got any questions about this, just drop them in the comments. If you want to see some stuff I'm working on behind the scenes, you can follow me at all social media at Ollie Mansour Editor. Hopefully you guys found this entertaining, informative. I don't know, you enjoyed this ride. Got more stuff coming to this because there's definitely a few weak areas that need to be addressed that I've talked about in the past, and some that I want to fix that I've never done before. So that'll be coming to the channel very soon. So if you do like these videos, actually like it and consider subscribing to the channel because it absolutely helps.